Hey everyone, this is Cameron from Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to us. We are everywhere. Make sure to share our episodes out, and if you can, consider supporting our Patreon. That way we can keep doing what we love, and that's talking about the wild world of animation. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And today we have a interesting double feature. We've got reviews for Despicable Me 4 and The Imaginary. But before we get there, I do just want to take a minute and just kind of appreciate the fact that much like in 2015 with the original Inside Out and the Minions movie, animation is pouring in a lot of money at the box office. I believe as of today, Inside Out is up to like 1.2 billion worldwide, which is great for the studio whose last couple movies before Elemental were reduced to Disney Plus fodder.
Or just haven't done well at the box office. It's very fascinating because, as dismissive as people can be for animation, three of the highest grossing animated films right now, because we know Despicable Me 4, barring how we actually feel about it, is going to make so much money, have been animated features. Not that they are the only ones saving the box office, but it was like that last year with the Super Mario movie. Then there's also just stuff like Ultraman Rising, which, as what I can tell, is a streaming hit and has made many fans, and people are making videos on TikTok and YouTube talking about it, except for the actual animation YouTube critics on YouTube who are ignoring stuff like this for some reason. But animation has done a lot of heavy lifting these past few years, whether it's the animation industry going strong and hard alongside other parts of the entertainment industry like reality TV, helping people through the pandemic, either job wise or people to watch shows and movies wise, to then see so many studios laying off their animators. Like Inside Out 2 made like $1 billion, and there's no sign of them wanting to bring back the 500 or so people that they let go.
I know it was like 14% of the studio was laid off, and there's a good chance that at least some of those are, getting rid of the redundancy from the previous regime. But still, a layoff is a layoff, and nobody likes layoffs.
No, and especially with Kung Fu Panda 4 making so much money at the box office, and yet DreamWorks is laying off its entire in-house animation team. And they're probably going to start laying off the ones for the Wild Robot after their gigs are done.
Oh, that one hurts even more because at least Pixar is still doing things in-house, whereas DreamWorks is about to change their entire process after this year.
Because apparently it's too costly to make animated films, even though companies like Illumination, I don't think I've ever seen a layoff happen at Illumination Entertainment. Granted, knock on wood, it could happen, but you never hear something like Nintendo laying off people because of a game's failure, or you never hear Illumination say they have to let go of people because their movies didn't make $5 billion at the box office or something like that. And their budgets are always very doable. They are getting bigger at points, but they're not like what Disney and Pixar are throwing into theirs with apparently like 200 million at points for some films.
Yeah.
Which it really shows that maybe you should find a way to cap that at 100 or less. I mean, I get it. Sometimes with booming technology, that's not generative AI schlop. It takes expenses and time to make new animation tools and what have you. But still, you don't need to hire 500 million celebrities if that's what's keeping these budgets ballooning upward.
Yeah, that's something to think about, and it may or may not come up once we get into the meat of the discussion, but if you have to choose between keeping your budgets at a reasonable amount versus star power, yes, some choices are going to have to be made.
Which is funny because some companies like Disney used to never do celebrity stuff until the runaway success of Aladdin and Robin Williams as the genie really pushed that forward. Not that Disney never used celebrities, but they always used like stage actors and character actors. That's why Phil Harris was in like 500 of those like Disney animated films.
Mm-hmm.
And Pixar, I mean, yes, they do make a big deal about who they get, but it's never the main focus of the marketing. You go to a Pixar movie because of the creatives that craft it, not because someone's in the movie you like. I think The Good Dinosaur had probably one of the smaller, well-known casts with Jeffrey Wright and I think Frances McDormand. And then
Yeah, that sounds right.
someone who played the cult pterodactyl characters. I think it was like Billy Zahn or something like that. He was in stuff like Out of Sight. Great movie, by the way. But like there are ways to make animation work without having to balloon the budgets. I mean, that's why Kung Fu Panda 4 and Inside Out 2 got flack because of Mindy Kaling and Bill Hader were not getting paid enough or less than Amy Poehler, so they left. And DreamWorks wanted to keep the budget for Kung Fu Panda 4 like smaller, so they didn't bring back any of the Furious 5 for reasons. And that was them blatantly saying, we saved $20 million by not hiring Angelina Jolie back. And it's like, man, okay. Or, well, since we're going to be talking about Illumination, does Steve Carell really need $12 million to voice Gru?
Oh, God, is he really getting that much?
He literally said that from the Minions Rise of Gru interviews, saying he was getting paid $12 million. And yet there are so many voice actors who are amazing at what they do, which is funny because Illumination will hire voice actors. Heck, John DiMaggio, the amazing talent that he is in Despicable Me 4. He was the bus driver.
Mm-hmm.
And he was great. So it's like, I'm not saying you need to be thrifty like the anime industry with not paying their voice actors enough, but you don't need to have just the biggest names. You can get some amazing people in the anime and US animation industry voice acting pool to do some incredible work. I think even like the 2011 Winnie the Pooh film maybe had like one or two big names, but otherwise it was like Jim Cummings and
Tom Kenny.
Yeah.
I think the biggest name in the Winnie the Pooh movie was Craig Ferguson was Owl.
It's just interesting of how what the theatrical animation scene is turning into right now. And for better or for worse, we're seeing that it needs to change and it needs to improve. It needs to do better. It needs to not try to cut costs or not only cut costs, but also adapt, grow to what the audience is looking for, grow and adapt to what other studios are doing and are willing to do. Granted, it's odd saying that right when we're about to talk about Despicable Me 4, the newest movie in the popular Despicable Me franchise, which is now at 6 movies. Well, 4 main movies and then the 2 spin-offs. And that's not even counting all of the shorts that are attached to these 6 movies or will be attached to these 6 movies because we know there's probably going to be some shorts on the Despicable Me 4 Blu-ray and such.
Oh, of course.
This one is directed by Chris Renaud, written by Mike White and Ken Dario, as we follow Gru and his family that now has a new member of the family with Gru Jr., a baby. Gru has to deal with being a father to now his own flesh and blood, literally. And he's having a little trouble with that. And if things couldn't get even more annoying and dangerous, a villain from his past, Maxime Le Mal, voiced by Will Ferrell, a French cockroach based villain, and his girlfriend, Valentina, are on the hunt to kill Gru and his family. And Gru now has to go on the run and go into witness protection. On top of all that, trying to now take care of a kid and then protect his family from Maxime Le Mal, the agency that Gru works for, then takes the minions and decides to experiment on 5 of them to make them super minions, minions with superpowers. And on top of that, Gru has a next door neighbor, a teenager named Poppy Prescott, voiced by the great Joey King, who is an aspiring supervillain who wants Gru to help her steal something from the academy that Gru and Maxime Le Mal went to when they were younger. And doesn't this sound so bloated?
It has the exact same problem that Despicable Me 3 had, in that there's just way too many subplots. And I think this one has even more than the last film, which is concerning.
Like the last film with Despicable Me 3, it was Gru dealing with the 80s themed supervillain, voiced by Trey Parker. Then Gru's long lost twin brother. Then it's with Lucy dealing with being a new mom to the 3 girls. And then it's Margot dealing with a crush on a boy who is crushing on her, but she's not interested. And then there's Agnes thinking she's going to find a unicorn. Instead, finds a one-horned goat. Once again, I have talked about this before, and my opinion hasn't changed. The biggest problem with Despicable Me's overall quality is the fact that it has very lackluster writing. Not that it could never be clever or witty and fun. It can and has been a thing constantly throughout these films, even though they all vary in overall quality. But they don't make extremely satisfying stories, except for maybe the first 2 movies. I was watching the cinema therapy video that was talking about Gru, and it really dawned on me how boring these characters are now by the 6th movie.
It's almost like they don't really have compelling story arcs anymore, but because these movies are so popular, the writers have to create scenarios to put them in. And I know that sounds like, yeah, no duh, that's how writing works. You know what I mean. After the second movie, hell, even after the first movie, it's gotten harder to create compelling stories for these characters. And the only reason that's a problem with like this franchise, compared to even some of other Illumination movies, is for some reason the Despicable Me movies, they try have their cake and eat it too, in terms of being both a compelling narrative but also be a collection of gags. It's hard to balance both of them if you fail at either one.
The problem is they could have cut out 2 or 3 of these plots and either made a 7th Despicable Me film, so Despicable Me 5, or another Minions movie. Because none of the plots here have any satisfying weight to them. It has been a huge issue that Gru's family has gotten less and less interesting and had less and less to do in this whole franchise. Every movie gives them less and less to do. And that's a huge problem when you have such a big cast and you are also unwilling to let the kids grow up in age. How much longer can Margot, Edith, and Agnes stay the same age especially when you finally introduce a new baby character. A baby takes like a long time to do, and that's like before the baby grows inside the womb. And that takes like 9 months.
I also don't buy the whole explanation that Chris Sano said that, oh, we're going by Simpsons logic. We're just not going to age the characters up. You can't do that and add new characters like a baby.
And not only that, but we'll talk about this a little later with some of the cameos they bring back from the previous movies, which that's a whole other weird thing about this movie that we'll get into it. Listen, I love Will Ferrell as Maxime Lemal, even though he's just doing another exaggerated French accent. And I would be lying if I still didn't think Illumination was still very good at bringing out actual performances from these actors and such. Because for some reason, they're one of the few studios who will whack you with a rolled up newspaper if you just act like yourself. You have to play a character.
Which is good, because if you're going to hire celebrities, at least let them have fun in the booth.
Even DreamWorks does this very well sometimes. Like in the third Madagascar film, Frances McDormand, who plays the villain, you wouldn't recognize it if you didn't know that was her. She is having so much fun with that character and performance. And here, I like Will Ferrell's performance fine, but this might be the weakest in terms of Illumination making these celebrities actually do the work, which is odd because Will Ferrell can do a lot of great voice work. He's a good character actor. There's a reason why he was the standout individual from his time on SNL.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask, do you think part of the reason Ferrell was cast in this movie was a little bit of stunt casting? Because I remember back when the first Despicable Me came out, there were people comparing it to Megamind. And this kind of seems like a nod to set comparisons.
I think so. I think it's a little bit of meta stunt casting. Kind of like when Teen Titans Go to the Movies casted Nicolas Cage as Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Sofia Vergara, what a nothing character. She has nothing to work with. Valentina is such a nothing character. There's nowhere for her to go with her performance. And Sophia can be very funny and very heartfelt. If you've watched Modern Family, you know she can, like, she has range. You think with all the fun that they gave Will Ferrell being part cockroach, they would do something equally fun with Valentina, but there's not much to her. And that's weird because Illumination is very good at making fun, quirky supervillains, even if they all don't leave a lasting impression.
That's a good point. And again, wasting Sofia Vergara is, why did it have to be her? It could have been anyone.
And then like Stephen Colbert is in here as Perry Prescott, the snooty next door neighbor. And I love Stephen Colbert, but he is not as funny as he could be in this movie. And Chloe Feynman is also very funny, but she's once again underutilized. Steve Coogan can be a little funny in this movie, but he's once again underutilized. That's the whole thing with this movie. Underutilized. The tragic backstory and connection with Maxime Lemal and Gru, underutilized. It's basically a punchline of Gru did a song first for the talent show that he was going to do for the talent show. Very weak hook. This should have been, at the very least, more fleshed out. Like, make it when they were younger or something. Like, Maxime Lemal gets expelled or something. And that's why he holds a grudge against Gru or something. Because not enough time passes for it to feel like there was something there.
I remember when Mike White was announced as part of the creative team for this movie. It sucks to say this, especially after praising the work he did on Migration. When Mike White was attached to this, I got really excited because I really liked what he did on Migration. But I'm of two minds. On the one hand, I think either sensibilities weren't really clicking with like the previous writers of the Despicable Me franchise. In fact, only one of the two, Candario, wrote this screenplay without his usual collaborator, Cinco Paul. But I'm also thinking without Mike White, this could have gone even more sour. So I'm not quite sure exactly who to blame here.
Well, I mean, like, to be fair, while we're saying the worst part about this movie is the writing, do not go and harass anyone who worked on this movie.
Oh yeah, want to make that perfectly clear.
But it's not the animator's fault. Like, because the animation is still, once again, very good. And when it's able to be funny with its comedic antics and its focus on fun character animation, it's pretty top notch. Like, Illumination started out in a pretty rough spot with Despicable Me 1 starting to show its visual age. But with Despicable Me 2, which is also starting to show its age, the other movies look fantastic. And they're a lot of fun to watch. And that means this movie as well. I loved looking at animators on Twitter reacting to Despicable Me 4 and focusing on stuff like the Honey Badger animation and how if I remember correctly, it was like it leads with the head and then the rest of the body follows in the animation. And the studio in France that does all of Illumination movies, they're so good. They have some extremely talented folks there. And I love the animation for a lot of these characters, especially like with Poppy Prescott and the Minions, especially the Super Minions, which, again, I wish they had something to do than just be part of a minuscule part of the overall movie. You could have taken the whole Poppy Prescott stuff and used it for like the next movie with Gru like being older and the kids being older and teaching Edith, Agnes, and Margot how to be supervillains. And they make a friend with Poppy Prescott's character. And I love Joey King as this character. She can be very funny, but she just has nothing to do after a bit. She just leaves the movie. And I know a lot of people like the DDR Dragon Force bit. I was too distracted by the fact of like, how would that work? It's like, that's a problem. I'm not engrossed or feel compelled to put my full attention to the movie. So I'm thinking about the mechanics of how a DDR machine would simulate through the fire and flames. Like, it's considered one of the toughest songs in Guitar Hero for a reason. If you don't have the finger reflex for that stuff, imagine how quick you need to be on your feet.
It would just be impossible, but
your legs would break.
But yeah, going back to that scene, you know me, the metalhead here. When I heard that there was a Dragon Force needle drop, that's when I got excited. And yeah, how they use that song, it's like, that's amusing. I'm a sucker for that kind of humor. But just kind of going back to our overall points, this movie is kind of all over the place. I'm a little bit mad that they wasted the concept of Mega Minions on like a subplot here.
They do nothing. Like, you could have cut them out and they would have been, like, the movie would have been mediocre, but it would have been slightly better. Because what do they do? They're just like superhero gags in a time where superhero culture and movies and pop culture is in a very strenuous moment in time.
We're in the transition period.
So to make superhero jokes, you're 20 years late, and then you barely have them do anything. I mean, some of the antics when they go out for the test run are funny. It reminds me of the commentary that Michael Bay gets sometimes with his action feels bombastic and chaotic because he doesn't hide the fact that there is so much property damage in his movies. And superhero stuff doesn't really acknowledge that. It's like, oh, whoops, we blew up 5 city blocks. That's not going to cost the city millions.
It's like that scene from that SpongeBob episode. We saved Bikini Bottom, and it's like all on fire.
Yeah. But, I mean, granted, I did love the joke of the Mega Minion who was basically Cyclops. I liked his two gags. Him heating up the cup of coffee or tea, and the laser just cutting through the earth and cutting a satellite in half. And then when they find him in the Alps making Swiss cheese, like, okay, that's cute. I like that gag. But they're not used well. Why weren't they used in the climax? They were barely utilized. I don't think they did anything. I can't remember much because this movie is so bad at making you remember key or moments or jokes.
The most they did in the climax, well, it was after Maxime had already been defeated. Then they just come in and basically just pummel him to pieces.
And that's it, man. Like, Margot, Agnes, and Edith, I think don't have any point in this movie. You have to have them there because they're part of the core franchise. But they don't do anything. They try to set up something like Agnes has to deal with the fact that she has to lie about her identity because they are in witness protection. Okay, that goes nowhere. Margot having a tough time at the new school. That goes nowhere. Edith is constantly screwed over. She is the manifestation of every trope of the middle child in fictional families. They do nothing with her. She is there, and that is it. And, I mean, she has one joke where she breaks the karate sensei's toe, but that's about it.
I feel bad for her because even in the better Despicable Me movies, I genuinely cannot remember any of her subplots other than, and the only reason I remember this is because Cinema Wins put out their Everything Great About Despicable Me video. She just has funny dialogue because it's very deadpan, cynical about just never being adopted.
Right, and the Iron Maiden gag is still very funny. It's dark, but it's very funny. Mm. But outside of that, there's nothing there for these characters. Lucy, okay, she becomes a hairdresser. Okay, doesn't really go further than she messes up someone's hair, and then she gets chased out of the grocery store by that client in a parody of Terminator or reference of Terminator. I think this is also the film that gives her the least to do. What is with this franchise and giving a lot of its female characters less and less to do unless they're a supervillain, like Sandra Bullock's character in the first Minions movie. They sure love to just make sure to have all the characters in the movie and then do nothing with them. I know this is supposed to be Gru is the focus, but what else is there for Gru to do now?
That is the burning question. And, they do this thing at the end where Gru meets up with Maxime in prison to, I guess, gloat that, yes, he was the one. He did copy him on purpose just to, embarrass him and all of that.
And what a weak punchline to that. I was expecting something a little funnier, or at least the execution of it to be funnier.
Instead, it just turns into karaoke night where, for some reason, and this is honestly the first time, if we're not counting the Vector short, that we see references to all of the previous villains.
It's weird. There's a really weird sense of finality with this movie. I don't know why. I walked out of this movie feeling really weird about it. Are they implying this is the last movie with the Despicable Me family? Because they not only bring back every villain from the mainline movies, they bring back this spin-off movie villains.
Yep.
We were talking about, man, we're never going to see these characters again. And yet we do, and it's in yet another mediocre dance party ending where they sing Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which, I'm sorry, where I work, I hear that song at least 3 or 4 times a week. I am so sick of it. It's not this movie's fault. And to hear it from Gru's nasally voice and Maxime's fake phony accent, it got more grating to me because I was like, oh my God, pick another song. It makes sense in a way to use this song. And then at the very, very end, where they're back at their house, We see Gru's brother, we see Gru's mom, and it's like, they didn't want to just give Steve Carell another 12 million to voice his brother Drew. It's just weird because we know they're going to make more Despicable Me and Minions movies. Like, they're never going to stop unless this thing just bottoms out.
Which I don't think will be the case, given how much money this movie made over like the 5-day weekend. I'm pretty sure this broke like some kind of record. So there goes that idea out the window.
And it's odd to feel like this is going to be the last one. Like, look at this. Look at all the characters and such. And I'm just sitting there like, they never announced this to be the final movie. Why are they treating it like it's the final movie? And even then, as a final movie, it doesn't work because the storytelling has gotten so bad with this overall franchise that it's so frustrating because the first one can be genuinely fun, even if I do prefer Megamind, but that's apples and oranges that just happen to be somewhat similar, or just, in themes and premises and such. Supervillains become good guys and whatever.
Yep.
Like, I liked Despicable Me 2. I thought the Minion movies were fine. I thought Despicable Me 3 was underwhelming. And Despicable Me 4 was probably the first time I have felt so disappointed. Not angry, like I wasn't frothing mad, but I walked out of that theater being like, that wasn't very good. If Garfield wasn't a thing, this might be the weakest US based animated feature of the year so far. In a year that has felt so tepid with releases, where once again, as usual, the foreign animation scene has, kicked down the doors and showed, hey, this is what we're doing. So it just doesn't make Despicable Me 4 look great when everyone else is going above and beyond to make compelling and fun experiences. And listen, I like watching the Despicable Me films, but mostly as background noise, like when I'm editing the podcast and such. I tend to watch them as like downtime things. They're never like, oh, I want to rewatch these movies. And I know kids don't care about themes and story structure. They just want more Minions. They want a lightweight experience because I'm sure a lot of parents had to explain to their kids what a panic attack was because of Inside Out 2 and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and how that's a very complicated thing to explain to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So you need something like Despicable Me. I get that's why these movies are popular, because people just want to go and have a fun, lightweight time. They're not really wanting to, I don't know, watch something a lot tougher like Art College 1994 and such, which that's not made for kids, but you get the idea.
Right. For me personally, this movie's fine, but like, I think for me, I'm not one of those people who judges animation on like an absolute scale where everything has to be as good as like the best from Pixar or DreamWorks. But a movie like Inside Out, you can have a really good story and be funny at the same time. So, yeah, it is disappointing to see the Despicable Me franchise head in the direction of diminishing returns.
I mean, like, it's funny because if any other film franchise was this lackluster in improvements to the overall experience and journey from movie to movie, most people would turn away and say, like, hey, we're done with this. No more Minions, no more Despicable Me. Make something new and interesting, which I was worried about was going to not happen with Migration. But Migration had legs, and it kept being a popular movie to go to because nobody else was going to see Wish at that point. They were going back and forward to see Migration until it came out on Blu-ray and on Peacock. And then Kung Fu Panda 4 came out. And then everyone kept seeing Kung Fu Panda 4. And then a lot of people really loved seeing Inside Out 2 and are now showing up for this. Nobody showed up for Chicken for Linda or Mars Express because G-Kids didn't give them a big enough release. I mean, I know those movies aren't going to be the most popular things ever, I accept that. That's something I have to accept as an animation fan. But I wish people showed up for them. If like they show up for something this middling. And I know you and I have our own rankings of the Despicable Me films. To you, which one do you think is the weakest? Is it Despicable Me 4 or 3 to you? Or is it one of the spin-off films?
I have to think about this because as great as Trey Parker was as the villain in Despicable Me 3, I still overall kind of find that the weakest. Although the more we're talking about this one, it's kind of fallen down the ranks. Like, I genuinely would rather go back and rewatch the Minions movies than this.
At least the Minions movies give you a lot of fun gags to sit through.
That's it. Because like what's great about the Minions movies is because the Minions they don't speak a legible language. A lot of the humor derives from sight gags, from slapstick. Those movies are structured in a way that it is really just a collection of gags, whereas the Despicable Me movies are trying to balance the gags with like an actual story.
Why not take the Super Minions and make them their own movie?
Exactly. I would love to see a movie called like Mega Minions.
They have fun concepts about them. I love the one that's basically the Thing. And
Yes.
just that nonplussed face that he has at all times is so funny, especially when he's in Vegas.
Oh, yes.
There's just not much there. I still think this is I don't want to say it's the worst one. I think it's the weakest one because at the very least, Despicable Me 3 still had Trey Parker's amazing villain and then the whole drama potential between Drew and Gru. And I just think the Minion antics were a lot funnier in that movie. The Minions in prison was way funnier than it should have been.
Yes.
But with this one, because of how they're trying to treat it as like the final story for these characters and how they still just stuff too much into this movie and it feels even more substanceless. And I just don't think it succeeds in what it's trying to do because I can't judge this movie off of my own dream fanfic version of the movie. I have to judge it on what it delivers, and I just don't think it delivers anything near that it could have or should have, like the previous movies. That's why Despicable Me 2 is probably the one movie to still be Oscar nominated, because it's still, while laying the groundwork to be more dismissive of its new secondary characters, still had a good balance of story, comedy, and like everything in between. I'm so disappointed with Despicable Me 4, and I wish it was better. I wish I liked it more. I wish I could have just said, hey, you know what? That was a pretty solid movie. But in a time period where you can now watch Chicken for Linda on the Criterion channel and hoping for a future Blu-ray release of the movie, and our next movie, The Imaginary by Studio Ponoc, it doesn't look good. We talked about this. It's a big fish in a pond with other big fish that doesn't realize or see that it's on its way out, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I even posed a question on Twitter about we know these movies are going to continue no matter what, but creatively, should Despicable Me 4 be the last one? I personally am kind of leaning towards yes, even though this being the last one for the story they have just doesn't work. But also they have the button at the end that brings all the other characters back. So I don't know.
Like I said, it's a weird movie to think about because it's trying to be the final movie and it doesn't work. It's a bummer. I wish it was better. And I think the people at Illumination are very talented. There's a reason why they are the one studio that treats their animators well and also is wholly against generative AI nonsense. They've been probably the most open about being against AI in a world where everyone is trying to be like, oh, how can we use this to save money and how I can make more money, when it's also dying a horrible death at the same time. Like, again, a lot of these Silicon Valley idiots are making something we don't need and are shoving it in our faces. They act like we need it, and yet we don't.
It's digital snake oil.
To see Illumination still be on the forefront of, we're not going to use generative AI because it does nothing for us. And art can only be made by people who make art, not some hapless, talentless hack who grew up on Silicon Valley dreams, only to find out that the reality of it is much sadder and wants to take their anger out on the people who are making art that people will watch over and over again and will completely ignore most things that Silicon Valley are coming out with. Let's move on. I'm ready to move on because I want to talk about one of my favorite movies of the year with The Imaginary, the newest film by Studio Ponoc. And we haven't talked about them yet. I mean, we talked about them with their one Olympics-inspired short, but we never did this podcast when Mary and the Witch's Flower came out, which, for people who don't know, Studio Ponoc was formed by a bunch of ex-Ghibli veterans, including the director of When Marnie Was There in the Secret World of Arrietty. And their first film was Mary and the Witch's Flower, which did very well because people were very much starved for a new Ghibli-ish or Ghibli-like experience. And while I thought it was a very good movie, one of my favorites from 2017, understandably, people couldn't quite get over the fact that it was Ghibli 2.0 over it being an actual legit Ghibli production, which we got last year with The Boy and the Heron. Everyone was waiting to see what they would do next. And as much as I love the anthology film that they made, Modest Heroes, that's still somewhat Ghibli-ish. And it was more experimental to be like, hey, here's what we can do and here's what we're offering. And one of the directors of the anthology, Yoshiyuki Momose, is now the director of The Imaginary, with Yoshiaki Nishimura being the writer. The plot is, we live in this world where imaginary characters and friends exist. They're called the Imaginaries. They're, thought up by kids from all over the world and all through time to be companions, friends, means of kinship and connection for whatever is going on with the kids' lives at that point in time. We follow Amanda Shuffleup, voiced by Evie Kizel, and her imaginary friend, Rudger, voiced by Louis Rudge Buchanan. A lot is going on in her life. Her father passed away. The bookstore that the mom runs is closing. And by the way, the mom, Elizabeth Shuffleup, is voiced by Haley Atwell. Y'all would know her from
Peggy Carter.
Yeah.
She was in the Christopher Robin movie.
It took me a while to remember where I've seen her. During basically like a blow up in argument because of the closing of the bookstore and the fight between Elizabeth and Amanda, stuff happens and Amanda and Rutger run into Mr. Bunting, voiced by Jeremy Swift, who y'all would know from Ted Lasso. He was Leslie Higgins. Mr. Bunting is a man who wants to devour imaginaries. So while he's chasing after Rutger one day, Amanda ends up getting hit by a car. Relatable, sadly, because I got hit by a car. Rutger finds himself alone and in a vulnerable state of either being eaten by Mr. Bunting or being forgotten. And he runs into a cat with two different colored eyes who is another imaginary named Jinzan, voiced by Cal Penn. Takes him to a world where all the imaginaries live, and it is up to Rutger to make new friends, to learn about life, love, and connection, and like the roles that imaginaries play in the lives of everyone, and find a way to help Amanda and to take down Mr. Bunting. I was very curious to see how this new Studio Ponoc film was going to work out because it was supposed to come out, I think, 2 years ago, but production delays and, of course, the pandemic,
of course,
delayed the movie. But even then, there was a lot to be on the lookout for with this one. It was basically their movie that would define Studio Ponoc as not just the Ghibli clone studio.
Just from a design philosophy, this definitely feels the most Studio Ponoc coming into their own, developing their own cinematic language. Honestly, all of the hard work they put into this really paid off.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite movies of the year so far, and not just animated movies, but just movies in general.
Yeah, it's in my top 5.
It's number 3 in my animated film list, alongside Chicken for Linda and Sirocco still being my favorite of the year. Let's start with the visuals, because this is the first big step with this company going into their own and showing, hey, we are not just Studio Ghibli. Yes, the human designs are they still look very Ghibli-ish, at least from the human perspective. And listen, you're going to have a bunch of Ghibli folks who are going to use what they learned from their time there for here. So I'm not going to ding it for it still looking like a Ghibli movie or whatever.
Yeah, me neither.
But I think the next big step was the texture and color work of this movie. While it can be very vibrant and beautiful, there's still a very soft, fuzzy hue to everything.
Was this all hand-drawn animation, or were they using some CGI? Because I genuinely couldn't tell.
I think it was kind of like the usual case of like what Ghibli does with CGI. They have some moments where they need it to be like they need to use CGI to help make this one scene work, because it's just going to be way too tough with all the detail work in this movie with certain perspective stuff. But it's done with like they plant or install or somehow work around the CGI-ness of it with the amazing 2D texture work. It's kind of like how Ufotable does Demon Slayer, where they use CGI for reference and they do like a rough CGI, like this is how the fight scene's going to be executed. And then the animators use that as the reference point. They essentially trace over the CGI with the 2D. I mean, it's still all 2D, but the placement and how they make everything work, they made like a CGI stage for that and such.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that explains a lot. Like, especially the transitions when Amanda is imagining all of these wild, elaborate adventures.
Well, it's like how Ghibli used it in Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away. Like, there's that scene where the wolf princess in Mononoke runs towards the human villain of the Mononoke. And you can kind of tell that there's CGI used because it would just be too tough to work around the fact that she is surrounded by a bunch of people and such. And then the scene where Chihiro is getting taken by Haku through the flowers to where the pigs are to see her parents and such.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you could tell there's a little CGI work there, but that's how I think it's used here in the Imaginary, especially like when Snowflake and Aurora are in the double-decker bus and how they maneuver around the bus. It looks a little weird, but mostly because I think it's 2D characters composited onto a slightly pseudo CGI bus, but it doesn't look CGI because of the 2D texture work and such. If I didn't tell you where you could possibly spot the CGI, you wouldn't know.
True.
So, but a lot of it was 2D animated, and you can really tell. Even if they're using more modern elements like tools and technology for 2D animation, you can tell. It's just how things move and how the physics work and such. It's like how a lot of people were talking about that new upcoming like witch hat anime
Oh yeah,
coming out, and how so many people were just like, "Oh my god, that simple little spin down the ladder was amazing." And it's just like, yeah, a lot of 2D animation can do that, but it's also really tough to do that, to do something that natural and grounded without having to like exaggerate the figures and models and such.
it goes back to what we said, well, a couple times already, but animation is not done innovating. Like there's still more that this medium is capable of.
Exactly. And you see a lot of that with this movie. Again, I think the texture work and the fuzziness of everything, it reminds me a lot of the Raymond Briggs stuff, like the snowman and like where the wind blows. Just something very soft about
Mm.
the look of the movie and just everything about it and such.
Also, the lighting was really great too.
Yeah, it was. It's a very gorgeous movie. And the music was also quite fantastic with Kenji Tamai and his music group, Age Has Springs, composing the music for this movie. And if his name sounds familiar, he did the music for the spring 2020 anime Seeing Yesterday to me. And while I did find that show overall frustrating, the music was beautiful, and his celestial highs and somber lows from that show carry over well into this movie. It's a lovely soundtrack.
It is.
Now, with the story, a lot of it has to do with the justification and how imaginary friends are used in our lives.
This is where I have to take a slight tangent into the fact that this is the third movie this year that has dealt with the concept of imaginary friends, and naturally, it's the best one of the three.
I tried to have time to watch Imaginary and If before watching The Imaginary. God, these titles, man. But I didn't have time, but I knew I was going to like this most, and not just because it was animated. It's just more what I've heard of the other two movies. But I'll give them a watch sometime in the future and see how I come out of those two experiences. It is very weird, though. It's like 2018 and 2019 giving us a lot of Bigfoot movies.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, again, this happens all the time, y'all. Just someone greenlights a project, and then other studios hear, and it's like, well, I want that. So make that. At least you could say they're all very different kind of movies. With maybe
Yeah.
If being the closest due to the more family audience of both movies. But still.
The difference here is that most of the time we are following the perspective of Roger, and it's not often that the imaginary friend is the main character more so than like the actual human.
Right. And it's quite an interesting story because it's all about. I know you have one quote from the movie that you love, and there's a line from Mr. Bunting that perfectly encapsulates the overall existence of why we love imaginary friends, or why imaginary friends are brought into this world, and like why they are a thing in the first place. With like Mr. Bunting, his reason of wanting to eat the imaginaries and live forever is a mix of very much he felt alone. So he wants to live forever so he can keep remembering his imaginary friend. And then when he's almost close to eating Rutger, he tells him that why nobody is listening to him is because no one can see or hear you, because no one wants to see or wants to hear you.
That is
That's
dark.
why people make imaginary friends. They feel like they are in a world where no one can hear or see them. So they imagine someone to help with that, to feel seen, to feel heard. It's like having inner thoughts. I mean, that's what we basically get when we're older. We dismiss the concept of imaginary friends and then just have like, what is your inner voice saying to you? And of course, that can be kind of loaded depending on how you talk about that, but you know.
Mm.
And I think that's just a beautiful way to look at imaginary friends. They help you grow and heal in a time where you might be in danger or feel alone or sad and such. It's like that for a lot of the characters. Like Amanda's mom, you find out had an imaginary friend because we all did. The movie implies that Picasso and Shakespeare and Beethoven all had imaginary friends.
All people who are ultra creative. That's another piece of world building, that imagination can only exist by people who are doing the imaginating.
Mr. Bunting wants to take away that creativity or devour it for his own gain, which is very fitting right now in a world where everyone is trying to use generative AI to get rid of the actual tools that help make art beautiful, which is humans and creativity, because generative AI is not creative. It's garbage. And there's no debate on that, by the way. It's garbage. If you want to see artists lose their jobs so you can use your AI stuff, you're garbage. We find out with Amanda's mom that she was in danger at one point in her life, especially because of the snake, which we see 2 different times, which I assume is because of Mr. Bunting, because it's the same snake both times we see it.
Mm-hmm.
She wishes there was a dog there, and she sees an old fridge. That fridge turns into a dog, which she names Fridge, voiced by LeVar Burton, who does a great job.
He does.
And then with Emily, she was obviously someone's imaginary friend and best friend until they passed. And the voice actor's name is Sky Katz. And I thought she was also delightful. I was very shocked about her death in the movie.
Yeah, that took me by surprise.
That's the thing. I think what makes this movie work more is the fact that there's a lot more at stake. It's willing to go dark in a time period where a lot of studios are struggling to balance creativity and making sure to hit the widest audience possible, which mostly meaning the widest audience possible gets more of the focus than just, hey, dark things happen all the time in the world. You can't just take away something like that, because like if Emily passed away, that could have meant like anything. Like it wouldn't mean as much to Rutger about stopping Mr. Bunting and finding Amanda. Like, yes, I do understand why some people say the ending of the movie can be a little convoluted with how it all works, with them having to finally stop Mr. Bunting, because I'm wondering how that works exactly, because of just the logic that they use in the movie. Because the logic in how the world works with the imaginaries is every day when the kids are asleep, they go into their dream. They find a child through like a missing child poster or like a wanted child poster. And every once in a while, an imaginary friend can be stuck with the human and turns into their new imaginary friend. And they'll change their shape and everything, which we see with Cruncher of Bones when he turns into that panda like hero from that one kid's dream and such.
Oh, Wobbles?
Yeah. Then with like the imaginaries, like at the end when Bunting is trying to eat Rutger, the mom brings back Fridge and to help take care of the giant snake and to prevent Rutger from getting eaten. And what happens with Mr. Bunting is that he is so consumed, literally and figuratively, with wanting to eat Rutger, his imaginary friend the creepy ghost girl, who was, I think, was his original imaginary friend,
Yeah, I think so.
says, like, you know what? Mr. Bunting needs to stop, and I'm going to sacrifice myself to finally make him come to terms with life and death. And then Mr. Bunting dies or is sent away, or I mean, he grows old, but the movie says he's hundreds of years old. They also add on to the fact that if a imaginary friend dies in the real world and not in the safe world that they are in, everyone else will start forgetting that imaginary friend. It's a little confusing, but I get the general gist of it all. Mr. Bunting's imaginary sacrificed itself to finally stop his constant greed and hunger for immortality and killing creativity to make way for a new kind of creativity. Again, very fitting and what's going on in the world right now with the entertainment. And Mr. Bunting is quite possibly the most sinister villain of the year so far.
I would agree with that. I described him as a mix of Judge Doom, Mr. Crocker, and the Nothing from The Neverending Story, where, yeah, when you combine those three, you create something pretty terrifying. And again, to compare this to movies from like the golden age of family entertainment, where they weren't afraid to take the story in dark places, so long as you have a happy ending. People who grew up with those films, I think, would fall pretty hard for this one. At least I hope so.
Same. I think what makes Mr. Bunting also extremely creepy is because he's targeting children. And that's always just going to make your villain way creepier.
Oh, of course.
He's interested in the child, but he's more interested in the creativity of the child, because that's when you are at your most unabashed and creative at points. It's like how Inside Out 2 said in the movie, you just grow up with a lot less joy in your life. That line hits so hard still because it feels like that at times. Mm-hmm. And it fits into this movie because that's what happened to Elizabeth. She lost the joy, and now that and at the end she gets it back. And it's such a good, compelling story. It works on so many levels, and it's charming, it's gripping, it's heartwarming, it's heartbreaking. The scene where Mr. Bunting essentially shoots Emily, that's scary to me. It's just like, I'm willing to kill this child imaginary to prove my point.
Yeah, like between that and like two or three other moments, yeah, I definitely shed some tears. Like once it's revealed how Roger was born, you know, when Lizzie goes up to Amanda's room, goes through like her closet and her belongings and sees the note that's written on the umbrella, and we get the flashback to Amanda's father. That scene hit me like a brick.
It's tough, man. It's such a good emotional point in the movie. And the movie has a really good cast also. We have the already mentioned Louis Reg Buchanan, Evie Cazell, Haley Atwell, Sky Katz, Cal Penn, LeVar Burton, Jane Singer, Jeremy Swift, who I have to say, it's so fun to see an actor who played like the nicest person on Ted Lasso play the creepiest person in this movie. It shows like the range of an actor and such, that they can pull off both. I mean, you need good material to work with, but still. And Ruby Barnhill plays Aurora. And fun fact, Ruby Barnhill was in Mary and the Witch's Flower as the titular character.
That's right.
So it's like, oh man, they're not going to beat the Studio Ghibli allegations now, because they're going to reuse all the actors that they use. Well, not reuse, but bring back actors from previous works. And then we also have like Snowflake, who's voiced by Roger Craig Smith, and Courtney Taylor as Cruncher of Bones. Man, I just love this movie. It makes me say, like, man, I love movies. I love animation. I love animated movies because of the unabashed and amazing creativity that comes out of these talented teams crafting these experiences. Like, even if we didn't like Despicable Me 4, the people there are still so amazing, and making any movie, no matter how it comes out, is a miracle and a half because of the current time we are in, because of everyone worrying, like, will this get deleted, will this get written off, will we ever see this again, will I have work in the industry ever again.
There's so much anxiety happening with everyone in the industry right now because the whole ecosystem is just in a very precarious position. And I read somewhere like a couple weeks ago that IATSE made a tentative agreement with the AMPTP, but nobody from the Animation Guild has like said anything. I don't know if that's because of NDAs or whatever, but still, July 31st is coming up, and I'm hoping for I'm hoping for the best.
Go watch movies like The Imaginary because it deserves to be known more and should not be buried by Netflix.
Go support. I know it's become a cliche, but I mean this sincerely. Animation is cinema.
Especially since we're getting more access to animation from around the world now, and people need to start checking it out. It's easier now than ever. But until then, that will be it for this episode. Don't know what we're going to do next. We might talk about The Lion King, but because of its, anniversary this year, we'll just have to see.
Until next time, Cameron, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Cam's Eye View. I have my own website called camseyeview.biz where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/camseyeview. That's where you can find me.
And you guys can find me on various social media sites at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/Coach K42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and that place at Ren Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube, on Podchaser. Consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/Renegade Pop Culture. Listen to all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. You need to escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.